Welcome to the Chronicle Queen. Here we bring you captivating short documentaries exploring African culture, history, and the most relevant topics of the day. Today's video covers a very controversial and often misunderstood topic, the crime situation in South Africa, especially concerning farmers, land reform, and the so-called white genocide. This video isn't about taking sides. It's about stating the facts. So, let's look at the truth behind the headlines and internet conspiracies. Many Afrikaners who left South Africa for the United States believed they were trading uncertainty for safety and the promise of the so-called American dream. But for many, that dream has proven far more complicated. Life in the US brings cultural and language barriers, a higher cost of living, and a deep sense of homesickness. The familiar networks of friends, family, and community are often replaced with feelings of isolation. While some have found success, others quietly admit they feel out of place, realizing that the challenges of a new life abroad can be just as heavy as the problems they left behind. Early in 2025, the newly elected American president, Donald Trump, announced a plan to extend an invitation to white South Africans, known as Afrikaners, to move to the States under the refugee program. However, after 8,000 Afrikaners expressed interest, thus far only 2 waves of Afrikaner refugees made it to the United States. These people were seeking asylum under a program launched by Trump called Mission South Africa. The program is aimed at white South Africans, mostly Afrikaners, who claim they are facing systemic violence and persecution in South Africa, linked to the ANC's land reform policies. But where does this idea come from? As far back as the early 2000s, far-right websites like Stormfront have claimed that white South Africans were at risk of genocide. The term Uhuru, or Night of the Long Knives, became popular in these circles, predicting mass slaughter after Mandela's death. And of course this never happened. The idea picked up steam with help from alt-right organizations like AfriForum, Solidarité, public figures like Steve Hofmeyr, and more recently, Elon Musk, Fox News, and Trump himself. In 2023, Musk tweeted about a white genocide in South Africa, fueling misinformation that experts have debunked. So, how does one become a refugee? To apply for refugee status under Mission South Africa, one must be South African, of Afrikaner or minority European descent, and you must be able to prove persecution or fear of persecution. Afrikaners are white South Africans descended mainly from Dutch, German, and French Huguenot settlers. The term Afrikaner, as it relates to Europeans living in South Africa, is relatively recent. Previously they were called burghers or Boers. The first recorded instance of a colonialist identifying as an Afrikaner occurred in March 1707, during a disturbance in Stellenbosch. When the magistrate, Johannes Starenburg, ordered an unruly crowd to desist, a young white man named Hendrik Biebouw retorted, "I will not leave. I am an African. Even if the magistrate were to beat me to death, or put me in jail, I shall not be, nor will I stay, silent." Biebouw was flogged for his insolence and later banished to Batavia, present-day Jakarta, Indonesia. The word Afrikaner is thought to have first been used to classify Cape Coloureds, or other groups of mixed-race ancestry. It should also be noted that Biebouw had numerous mixed-race siblings, and may have identified with coloured socially. The growing use of the term appeared to express the rise of a new identity for white South Africans, suggesting for the first time a group identification with the Cape Colony rather than with an ancestral homeland in Europe. Some believe the term originated from Khoi and mixed communities like the Orlam Afrikaners. Many believe the term Afrikaner was first linked to Cape-born slaves and free blacks who used identifiers like Van Africa or Van de Kaap, translating to from Africa or from the Cape. This was a common feature in free black and Orlam communities, as slave masters often gave them surnames linked to their place of origin or the month in which the slave ships arrived at the Cape. Hence, still today you will find many colored people with surnames such as these. Before white Boers claimed it, communities like the Orlam Afrikaners, led by Oda Rum, Klaas Afrikaner, and Jonker Afrikaner, used the name with pride, and called themselves Afrikaner or Africans. In 1875, the GRA, which stands for the Society of True Afrikaners. The organization was formed to assert a true Afrikaner identity, implying others already used the term. It wasn't until 1875 that white settlers institutionalized the term to build a distinct identity through the GRA. During this period multiple Boer wars happened, and this left Afrikaners feeling increasingly isolated and under siege, which solidified their group identity. Many believe these experiences formed the foundation for the creation of apartheid in South Africa. Land is at the heart of South Africa's inequality. During colonialism and apartheid, more than 80% of land was seized from black and colored South Africans. In the early days of apartheid, the nationalist government started forcibly removing black South Africans from areas that they deemed ideal for Europeans only. As a result, between the years of 1960 to 1983 approximately 3.5 million blacks were forcibly removed from their homes and moved into ghettos and townships, which unsurprisingly left a lasting legacy of violence, substance abuse, communicable disease, and overall income inequality. Post-1994, the government attempted redistribution, but with limited success. Land expropriation without compensation, EWC, aims to accelerate this by amending Section 25 of the Constitution. Let's debunk some common myths. EWC isn't about seizing all white-owned land. It targets unused property, whether it is abandoned or state-owned land. It's not Zimbabwe 2.0. South Africa's approach is legal, slow, and debated in Parliament. There's no policy targeting white farmers based on race. The reality is that land reform is meant to undo past injustices, especially those tied to forced removals like District 6 and Sophiatown. Still, it's a complex issue. Critics worry about misuse, while supporters say justice is long overdue. District 6 in Cape Town was a vibrant, multiracial community until it was declared a whites-only area under the Group Areas Act in 1966. Over 60,000 residents, mostly colored, were forcibly removed to Cape Flats townships. A decade earlier, Sophiatown in Johannesburg, known for its jazz culture and political activism, faced a similar fate in 1955. Armed police evicted about 60,000 residents, demolishing homes and replacing the area with the white suburb of Triumph, meaning triumph. Both communities were targeted for their mixed-race populations, which the apartheid regime saw as a threat to segregation. The removals destroyed long-standing social networks and cultural life, leaving lasting trauma. District 6 remains largely undeveloped, symbolizing the fight for land restitution in democratic South Africa, while Sophiatown was renamed in 2006, reclaiming its identity as a hub of black cultural resistance. The forced removals from District 6 in Cape Town and Sophiatown in Johannesburg remain some of the most painful scars in South Africa's history. In the 1950s and 60s, entire communities were uprooted under the Group Areas Act, their homes bulldozed to make way for white-only developments. For the people who lived there, these were not just streets and houses, they were places of belonging. Neighbors were like family, shops knew customers by name, and music, laughter, and culture filled the air. District 6 was famous for its close-knit neighborhoods, music, and vibrant cultural life, while Sophiatown was a hub for jazz, politics, and intellectual exchange. But under apartheid's rigid racial segregation laws, these areas became targets for demolition. Being told to leave felt like having a piece of your identity stripped away. Many described the day the trucks arrived as the day their world ended. Families were moved to faraway townships, often to cramped, unfinished houses on dusty, unfamiliar land. The sense of community was shattered. Many never recovered from the loss, and some elders say they have never truly felt at home again. Even today, survivors speak with tears in their eyes. For them, the removals were not just about losing property, they were about losing dignity, security, and the roots of generations. Younger descendants still carry this trauma, hearing stories of vibrant neighborhoods they will never see. Efforts at land restitution and memorialization have been made, but the wounds remain deep. The memory of what was taken is a reminder that home is more than a place, it is a piece of the soul, and once torn away, it leaves an ache that time alone cannot heal. The apartheid government tried to rationalize these removals by claiming they were necessary for urban renewal, better housing, and crime prevention. Officials argued that mixed neighborhoods bred social problems, and that moving people into racially homogeneous areas would create order. In reality, the removals were a brutal exercise in racial engineering, aimed at securing prime land for white occupation while breaking up politically active, multiracial communities. Hendrik Verwoerd, the then Prime Minister and architect of the apartheid state, rationalized apartheid by stating, "Our policy is one which is called by an Afrikaans word, apartheid, and I'm afraid that has been misunderstood so often. It could just as easily and perhaps much better be described as a policy of good neighborliness, accepting that there are differences between people. But while these differences exist and you have to acknowledge them at the same time, you can live together, aid one another, but that it can best be done when you act as good neighbors always do." Pre-1994, crime stats in South Africa were heavily skewed. White areas were over-policed, while black areas were ignored. State violence and repression was the norm. The apartheid government was itself a major perpetrator of violence, particularly against black South Africans. Police brutality, political assassinations, and detention without trial were common. One such example is that of Vodaba's son, nicknamed Dr. Death. He was the head of the apartheid government's chemical and biological warfare program, named Project Coast. Basson was allegedly tasked with developing toxins and drugs intended for use against anti-apartheid activists and enemy soldiers. Despite facing over 60 criminal charges, including murder and fraud, he was acquitted in 2002, sparking national and international outrage. Anti-apartheid activists and communities experienced systemic violence, which were often not counted in official crime stats. The law was selectively enforced and crime statistics were unreliable and racially skewed. Policing focused more on enforcing apartheid laws, for example, the pass laws, rather than protecting people, especially in black communities. Many crimes in townships went unreported or unrecorded, and violence within black communities was often ignored by authorities. Official stats suggested that white communities had lower crime rates, but this largely reflected the prioritization of policing white communities, while black communities were underpoliced. Hence, some white South Africans had a false sense of safety due to the heavily policed, militarized protection they received, in contrast to the neglect black areas received when it came to public safety. The years after receiving its independence in 1994, South Africa experienced a rise in violent crime. After the fall of apartheid, there was a surge in reported crime, especially violent crime such as murder, rape, and robbery. This spike was due to a combination of factors. Firstly, there was a breakdown of apartheid-era controls, which made it easy for drugs to flood into black and colored communities, combined with an existing gang culture and substance use issue created the perfect recipe for the disaster we see today. Furthermore, socioeconomic inequality, urban migration, and increased reporting also had an impact on the increase in violent crimes. Additionally, in recent years, weak border control, leading to uncontrolled immigration, made South Africa, particularly Cape Town, a safe haven for cartels stemming from countries in South America, North and Western Africa, Eastern Europe and China. The apartheid legacy left many areas impoverished, underdeveloped, and without proper policing. High unemployment, especially among the youth, and social dislocation contributed to high crime rates, particularly in townships and informal settlements. Under democracy, South Africa started publishing regular, public crime stats. Additionally, citizens across all races were more willing and able to report crimes, especially as community policing structures expanded. South Africa remains one of the most violent countries globally, with high rates of murder, gender-based violence, organized crime and gang violence, especially in the Western Cape. The police force has struggled with issues of corruption, under-resourcing, and public trust, which only adds to the problem as many of these violent cases go unpunished. Are white farmers really being targeted? As mentioned before, South Africa has one of the highest rates of violent crime globally. But this isn't unique to any race. In fact, it seems the opposite is true, as black and colored people are more likely to be victims of violent crimes. This reflects the deep inequality, unemployment, and weak law enforcement. The term farm murders is real. However, it affects farmers of all races. Since the majority of South African farmers are of European descent, logically it makes sense that they would make up the majority of farm attack victims. Moreover, majority of these attacks are usually financially motivated as opposed to state-sanctioned violence, as is often alleged by these extreme right-wing media outlets, like Fox News and Afroforum. Recent data from Agri-SA and the police showed that farm attacks are mostly criminal, not racial. What's even more interesting is that between 40 to 70 farm murders occur annually. This stands in sharp contrast to the hordes of black and colored people murdered daily, due to inescapable gang violence. Not to mention the innumerable women and children that are victimized annually in South Africa. White and black farmers, workers, and their families do fall victims, but many attacks are robberies or disputes, not hate crimes. Yet, these incidents are politicized. Colored and black farmers face land invasions, extortion, and even worse, state neglect. But their stories often go unheard. Farm murders are tragic, but they are not genocide. That term disrespects real genocides. Femicide is a real crisis that deserves more attention in South Africa and internationally. A woman is killed every 3 to 4 hours. The rate of intimate femicide is 5 times the global average. Most victims are murdered by current or former partners. So, where's the international outcry for them? If Trump wanted to highlight genocide in South Africa, why not address the gender-based slaughter happening every single day? 320 women are killed, 3,934 are raped, and 5,341 suffer grievous bodily harm every month in South Africa. This issue affects women of all races, especially poor black and colored women. Names like Karabo Makuna, Jessie Hess, Uyinene Merwityana, Reva Steenkamp, Leandre Jegels, Anine Boysun and Chegafatso Pule, to name a few, sparked national outrage. But change has been slow. So, to wrap up, is there a white genocide in South Africa? No. Are Afrikaners facing challenges? Yes, but so are millions of others. Is land reform needed? Yes, but it must be fair and lawful. Is crime a problem? Absolutely, but it's rooted in poverty, inequality, and broken systems, not race. And is femicide the real overlooked genocide? Probably. Let's approach these issues with evidence, not fear, and not politics.